welcome to another review of First Minister's Questions and a general rammy about what is good and bad in Scottish politics from the IREC radio crew. Today we have Alex Grant, Phil Etheridge, Laurie Stewart and myself, Stuart Lockhead, and if you're watching on video, hi.
Thought you had a memory.
Nice haircut.
Aye. Well, there you go. Spring cleaning, some people call it.
It's the haircut and all
Like
that.
Samson, his strength.
Of course, it's all the strength it's gone.
I'll
that's
explain later how it happened.
No, we don't need to know that.
No, no.
A slip of the trimmer.
Were you asleep?
Well, there we go.
So,
So,
you missed your throat.
FNQs this week. I think we were back. At least we were back this week to something that was a bit worth discussing, given
Aye.
that we had a couple of weeks that were dull as dishwater. And today, I think the main topic was oil, and of course the budget. Although, strangely enough, very little of the budget itself got discussed.
No, well, they wouldn't want to discuss the budget, would they? It's the same old mantra: too wee, too poor, and you can't afford it. The only line of attack that the Labour Party in particular can have is what you're suggesting about full fiscal autonomy is the end of the world. It's an extension of the where they found themselves is a lot of people who didn't want to jump off the cliff and vote yes in the referendum because they were too feared, are now inclined to vote SNP for all the good reasons.
Yeah, because they're not jumping off a cliff anymore.
Well, exactly,
Yeah.
but what the Labour Party in particular, and they're all trying to do it, they're all trying to say, it may not be as big a cliff as the one you thought you might have to be jumped off before,
It's a fair-
but it's still a big cliff.
Still a good summation. Norrie.
Well, I agree with what Alex said. I mean, I'm just stunned that the Labour Party seem totally lost in the wilderness, both at Holyrood and Westminster. They don't seem to have a strategy.
No.
And, you know, I mean, this thing with Balls this morning on Radio 4, where he comes out and he says there's nothing in a Tory Chancellor's budget I would change.
Reverse? Was that
Reverse was the actual word.
Yeah.
I mean, what message does that send? That sends a message that the SNP have been banging the drum for the last month and a half. You're just the same as the Tories. You're red Tories.
Well, they're actually. Well, it could be perceived to be worse because you expect that kind of behaviour from Tories. I mean, they're not really interested in humanity, but it's when there's been 11,000 deaths, roughly, that they can attribute to DWP, sanctions, early deaths, all that over the last 5 years. This is what they're saying, up to about 11,000 with people dropping themselves, people dying, people having heart attacks, the stress-related diseases, all that. It's not a lot of people over 5 years with 60 million people. And Balls does not want to reverse that.
Wait a minute, we've been to war and lost less than 11,000. How many people did we lose in
Sorry,
Afghanistan?
that's
460.
11.
years.
Oh yeah, that's 11,000 the most vulnerable people that should be.
We
that
lose
should be looked.
460 soldiers in Afghanistan over 10 years.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
talking
but can we just go back to that? The line of attack, in my opinion, should have been as follows. There was nothing in particular in yesterday's spring budget that I've got any big problem with, because all it was designed to give a few incentives to the middle class, to be quite frank, because not charging any tax on £1,000 worth of interest, as Stuart Campbell pointed out yesterday. How much money do you need to generate £1,000 worth of interest at the minute? And it's a lot. So what he should have said was, there was nothing particular in that budget I've got any particular argument with. However, what they didn't talk about yesterday is what's going to be in their manifesto and what the X billion pounds of cuts are going to be come the revolution if they win the next election. and that is where we have policies that are different. That's what he should have said, and he didn't do it. All he said was, the only one thing he said in that context was, we'd reverse the bedroom tax. That was all he could say.
Well, it doesn't affect us in
It's already
Scotland.
done.
That's dealt with in Scotland.
Okay, look, I don't know who else picked up on this, but I'm sure I heard Nicola Sturgeon talk about the two Tory parties. And when she was talking about the Labour Party, she said, this is the Tory Party, this is the Red Tory Party. No, I never heard the party leader use that term before.
No, I don't know. He should have said that. I mean,
Nobody else heard that? I
Well,
thought-
when you consider the attacks that are on a sexist basis, racist basis, any kind of basis you can think of that are coming from, I'd say it's the opposition, even though it's the government and the Labour Party, but they're all, that whole bit with Coburn and that whole horrible feeling, yeah, they sort of kind of condemned it, but you can see they're all loving it. Same with the attacks on Hamza, because you see it online, you see it on some of the media, and they're being oversensitive.
Well,
and
no,
stuff like that.
that's-
That's appalling.
No,
No,
let's be
party leaders
fair
actually
to Scottish politicians.
Yeah, they criticised it.
Every one of them came out against it, as did every one of them come up against the homophobic attack on Ruth Davidson.
Yeah.
In fact, to announce in Parliament that the individual responsible has been identified and thrown out of the SNP.
Well, that was quite brave, I think.
But that wasn't the thing I wanted.
What they used
I
to
wanted
say,
to hear them
wasn't it?
being
Well,
arrested
what
and
it,
charged.
what it allows them to do is anything that comes out of the Labour Party, the Tory Party, UKIP,
Yeah.
Liberals,
It's fine,
anything
back
that
up.
comes out,
Yeah.
they can turn around and say, well, look, this is how we dealt with it. We found him, we threw him out the party. What are you going to do?
Yeah, that's fair.
What I can't understand is, I mean, both those things they've
Personally, I
done
would
are
have
probably a
given the guy
criminal
a
offence.
serious kicking.
They could probably both be charged with a criminal offence. Incitement to racism,
Well, no,
actual racism.
Well,
Oh, yes,
the
of
Coburn- the Coburn
couldn't
statement-
couldn't be accused of that. Coburn's statement was
as I
was
call
nasty, but
it,
it
what he
wasn't
said
illegal.
was,
Or as I
Hamza
call him.
used
Or
to-
as I call it.
Abu Hamza, yeah, exactly. No, I mean, he's just a twat. Everything he says is. The more platforms we can get him to stand on against real people, the better.
Oh, you'll see nothing of him. You'll see nothing of him till
Well, of course, he's not
CPC
standing for
died.
Parliament, is he? I thought he was supposed to stand for Parliament in England. That was when he got elected as an MSP in Scotland. There was a lot of reference to he was a potential candidate for an English constituency in the general election, but that doesn't seem to have, because you can do that, but it hasn't come about as far as I'm aware.
Now here we go. I was looking for this. I was looking for the line. Nicholas Sturgeon said, "All it did was glue together the Tory parties.
Well, that's good. No, she's been developing that line for weeks.
Didn't talk about red or blue. She just says all it.
No, well, the fact that she could stand there with that
Glued
clipping
together
from
the Tory parties.
Ed Balls was perfect.
When are the SNP going to kill this get rid of Barnett thing? When are they going to come up with a line that says, no, we don't want rid of Barnett, we want independence, which by definition means Westminster wouldn't have to give us anything.
And we would not.
That's playing. That is playing.
That's a catch-22. I don't.
Do you think they're intentionally just ignoring?
Well, I don't. They kept referring to the Labour Party on several occasions. Referred to Jackie Bailey, to this modelling they've been doing on the economy. So they don't want to play to the Labour Party's simplistic line, which is you want to get rid of Barnett. It's very tricky because everything is focused on the short-term numbers coming out of jails. It's quite hard to debate it. Although I don't think. When I said to Tommy Shepherd last night, I asked him this question. I actually said, one of my major criticisms about the referendum campaign was an inadequate presentation, difficult though it was, given how we were being attacked by from every direction, about the economic basis for independence. Because it was very easy to, and they've done it, focus on oil. And the minute the oil price goes down, which is serendipity for these guys, I mean, nobody, as Nicola pointed out, the OBR, the government, the whole 9 yards, nobody expected to see the Saudis dropping the price of oil the way they've done it. So it's a very good line of attack. Your whole thesis is based on oil. She's trying quite hard to say it isn't, but I do think they need a much more powerful communication about the economic case. To say that we generate more in tax and have done for the past 35 years is all very well, but they just come back with, but you get 1,400 quid more in subsidy via the Barnett formula.
Okay, but let me point out that what wasn't led by Kedia Dunhill, which was the budget. It was led on oil, which was last week's story, the story from the week before. It's not this week's story. And then again,
Yeah, but it is
who
from that point of view.
brought it? The only person that brought up, well, it was a double-barreled attack. Jackie Bailey brought up oil again.
Yeah.
They didn't want to talk about the budget.
No,
As
no.
I'd like to point out to the public that the so-called independent report by Professor Brian Ashcroft. Brian Ashcroft is Wendy Alexander's husband,
Yeah.
former leader of the Labour Party in Scotland. It is not an independent report. And why I'm disappointed that Nicola Sturgeon didn't point that out.
You can't point that
She
out.
doesn't have to say that Brian Ashcraft is Wendy Alexander's husband. She could simply say it is not an independent report, given the circumstances.
She'd be
Mr.
accused
Ashcraft,
of
the circumstances.
personalises and everything
You
else.
can't, no. You can't,
No. You
if
can't.
his role as an academic is to do that sort of thing, you are basically
And Wendy
insulting
Alexander's
his
more an academic than a politician
But
because
that's
she has,
irrelevant.
you know, that
Well,
type of thing.
Okay, well,
now.
they did come back. They did come back indirectly and attack the NHS because both the Tories and Richard Simpson, on behalf of the Labour Party, attacked the NHS towards the end. The issue was so-called confidentiality clauses for senior staff when they leave the NHS. And I thought it was very interesting that Nicola Sturgeon had what they call a very robust defence of that.
She did.
Mm.
Not only did she say that they'd reviewed the situation, and although she didn't make the opposition did attack the Scottish government on the fact that there have been 40 confidentiality clauses in the last year, but she pointed out that that does not stop people whistleblowing. In fact, it is illegal to stop people whistleblowing.
I know, but before you get to that, Stuart, the problem with that, you see, what Richard Simpson said was, you told us these things were going to be banned. There were 44 of them. Now, what you have to be able to say in that, in expansion to what she did say, was there are only 44 because the 44 were reviewed and approved as being appropriate and couldn't be whistleblowing.
I'm sorry to repeat myself. I thought her defence was very robust. Basically, if you think that a confidentiality clause is a gagging order for bad behaviour inside the NHS, however you describe it, it's not, because it is actually illegal to try and stop people whistleblowing.
I know, but if that's the case, you see, what the catch-22 here is gagging orders.
Well, it might affect your pension.
No, but wait a minute. Confidential. Look, I've been there. I've done it. You know, if you get made redundant or you fall out with a company, you basically sign an agreement that neither party will talk about anything. And if you don't talk about anything, I'll give you this money to go away and quit bothering me. It gets talked about here as though it's unique to the NHS. It's not. And if there is a fundamental law that precludes gagging orders or whistleblowers, why are we even discussing these agreements anyway, confidentiality agreements, because they're irrelevant. So if you say on the one hand, we're going to stop them, and then on the other hand, well, they can't include something that's illegal, that's bullshit. That is a stupid place to be.
You made it pretty clear what the difference is. Ruth Davidson actually focused on I thought it was an interesting political angle, and she claimed that whatever Nicola Sturgeon said in London about she would vote Green if she was in England. Ruth Davidson thought she was on a winner there. Quite clearly, she'd been sat in an office with all her pals and acolytes, and they go, "Oh, well, that's what you'll see." However, I think, what did you think? I thought Nicola Sturgeon put her completely in her place.
I don't think she did.
No, I mean, she said what was obvious.
Yeah, she did.
You know,
She didn't
I'm in
answer
Scotland, I vote in Scotland,
Yeah.
I'm going to vote
So
SNP.
she didn't answer she didn't answer the question. I don't think it's a particularly great line of attack, but arguably she could have answered it and said, well, if the choice is available in England, the Green Party offer the best choice. The Green Party aren't going to be in government. The Green Party aren't going to be able to shut down oil production, so why wouldn't I? But it was a tricky thing to say. If you're going to say people in England should vote Green, as she did at that meeting and that presentation she did in London the other day, you need to be aware that question could be asked.
That's a stupid thing to say, actually. It was a stupid question to say.
I thought
Well, no, I
Where's
have
the
a-
vote?
I have a sneaky feeling that basically it's part of the deal they did because she met with them that morning.
Oh yeah, maybe.
You know, let's show some support for each other in our separate countries.
I know, but it doesn't get you.
I'd like to
It
come
does.
back to
The Greens can't
the,
have it, so it's just something the fuck
the
on.
confidentiality clause because I've noticed that every now and again something that actually has a system to deal with the problems, be their problems, gets asked a couple of months before it gets put in front of a committee. Now, as part of her answer, she said that all 44 of these gagging orders, confidentiality clauses, are going in front of an all-party committee in May. Now, this has happened before. And one of the great things I think about the Scottish Government is that they do belt and braces. That they come up with some sort of policy, goes into law, and they allow a mechanism to check that it's working the way it should. I think that has stymied a lot of criticism. And what's happening is these questions, the answers to which will be available 8 weeks down the line, are getting asked early.
Yeah, but they're getting asked early for what reason, Norrie? It's in an attempt, as far as I can see, to be able to say, the only reason it's getting reviewed is because I asked about it 2 months ago. Which actually isn't true, but it sounds good.
Yeah, they take credit for everything.
Start to say, look, we're no stupid. We thought that there could be problems here, and we want to make sure there aren't. Therefore, it is being reviewed in front of this committee that contains your party members as well.
Fair enough. Look here, here's another point I think that I don't know none of you and the rest of the guys have noticed. To some extent, every week there's coordination between the opposition parties, and today there was clear coordination again. It was oil, because it was oil. Alex Johnston, his question was clearly political, as it would be in Parliament, but he asked about oil, and he asked about city status following the budget, but he didn't actually talk about the budget. He simply said Aberdeen and Inverness will be benefiting from city status and assistance from London because of that. Now that allowed him to raise the question of because of the decline of oil. He said he actually mentioned it, so oil got mentioned again there. But Nicola Sturgeon came back and said, "Well, be aware that we contributed £500 million to the city of Glasgow under the city agreement."
But then looking at that as well, this decline of oil. I mean, this is why when they go on to decline of oil, what do you mean it's decline this week? Because the Saudis and the Americans want to screw up Putin. That's all. This time next year it might be 100, 120, 130. That's why they look at it over a period of 10 years usually to get a mean average.
Let me try and look into a crystal ball. Before they made this in, we already had a little taster earlier this week. Ineos.
Oh.
Talking about 1.5 billion pounds.
2.5.
All right, 2.5 billion pounds of benefits going to communities where fracking or unconventional gas will be extracted. Now, there were some facts thrown around this week, but somebody threw a fact out. One of the facts was that 10% of Scotland's GDP comes from the Grangemouth complex. Now, no Scottish government can ignore that.
No, so just take it off.
Can it?
It's part of the reason that it's a moratorium.
They can't go further than moratorium at the moment.
Yeah.
I know,
All I'm saying is expect the Ineos position to be raised even more before the election.
Well, hang on a minute. I'm not sure it will be raised because the Tory party support fracking. The Labour Party are shitting themselves and don't know what to do about it, so they abstain and avoid the issue. So they ain't going to raise that. But going back to your previous point about whether it's George Osborne reducing tax on oil, and she made some comment about that in terms of just cutting back what he'd increased in the first place, and the Tory boy saying, you know, the government is giving city status to Aberdeen and Inverness. The obvious response to that, in my humble opinion, is if Scotland had total control of all of these things and fracking could be included in that, then I can assure you more of those things would be getting done, and they'd be getting done faster. And I actually don't think she was powerful enough in saying that. She did make the comment about reversing a tax that Osborne had put on in 2011 in the first instance. But, you know, Osborne said yesterday, I tried to attempt to say again, well, it's only because of the broad shoulders of Westminster that we can do this. I mean, it was the most fatuous piece of bullshit I've ever heard in my life. If we had control of the tax on oil, we could do exactly the same thing and could have done more of it and faster.
Well, in fact, all he did was reduce a tax that he imposed
in the first place. I know.
Right, come on, we have some scores, because we had some interesting performance today. We had no Willie Rennie for Phil to have a go.
No, holy Willie, what a beast.
We're still giving him 0. He smiled a couple of times.
Phil, what about some scores? Nicola, Kezia, Ruth.
I'll give Nicola a straight 9. Thought she did very well. No smiles, just total business, wasn't it today?
She's very professional, isn't she?
Oh, she's very, very professional. And actually, so was Ruth as well. I thought Ruth was very good today. Yeah. But I mean, if you look at the quality of the questions, I mean, you can never give many scores for the quality of the questions, but for performances, yeah, I can give it a 7, I think.
Ooh.
In compensation for that.
And Kezia, your party leader.
You know,
It's not his
7.
party.
It's not my party.
He's not in it anymore.
6, I'll give her.
Oh, you don't have it anymore.
No.
I thought we could still describe you as our Labour Party representative on the panel.
No, within 40 minutes of a certain individual called Jim Murphy appearing on the news, I was up at the Royal Bank of Scotland. Catch up. That's it.
All right.
Yeah, and then they.
Presiding officer today, did you notice
Oh, she really needs. I'll go down to 4 this week. She really needs to cut somebody off, kick somebody out. They're just getting a.
James Kelly, I think, was the name I had mentioned.
Aye.
Alex?
I'll give exactly the same scores as Phil.
So that's 9 for Nicola, 6 for Kezia,
Yeah. 7 for Ruth.
7 for Ruth.
4. Aye. Exactly.
All
I'll
right.
give Nicola 9.
She's getting a big
I'll
score.
give Kezzy a bit more. I'll give Kezzy a 7.
Mhm.
And I'll give Ruth a 6 because the question was a bit fatuous. Presiding officer, well, she had to do a bit of shouting, but that's not her bad behaviour, that's their bad behaviour. And they do shut up when she tells them to, so
That's
I'll
true.
give her a 5.
Okay, that's 10, 18. So it's actually the presiding officer is a loser this week. And that's because she was only just below average. Nicola, a full 36 out of 40. Kezia, 24 out of 40.
Kezia
And,
needs to change the hairstyle too.
And Ruth, 25.
That's sexist.
25 out of 40, and presiding officer only 18. Which tells a tale that perhaps they're finally getting their performances together, they're getting geared up for an election. I don't know where we're going with this election. How many weeks we got left? 48 days?
7 weeks.
Yeah, it will be literally.
7 weeks. 7 weeks
Some
today.
weeks today.
We're just